All right. Well, welcome to our Toast Tuesday talk today. We're really excited to be joined by our executive assistant, Molly Markow, and our former assistant of programs, Annie Fisher, who was with us for quite some time and left us to go to grad school. I'm really excited to catch up with her here today, learn more about what she's been up to, and also look through some of our archives and our history, which she went to school for archiving. So I'm going to share a bit of information about the two of them. My name is Sierra McKissick, and I'm the Communications Associate at Oxbow. And Andy Fisher was a fellow in 2010, the summer after her senior year of undergrad at Parsons. She started working on campus in the office during the summer of 2011 and 2013, and began working year-round, splitting her time between Chicago and campus as the program assistant and registrar. She worked mostly out of Chicago from 2017 onwards and became the assistant program director in 2018 before leaving for grad school in 2019. She got her Master's of Science in Library Science with a concentration in archives and records management from the School of Library and Information Science at UNC Chapel Hill. She graduated in May and is currently working in the archives at Planting Fields Foundation, which operates as a historic estate and arboretum in partnership with the New York State National Park System on Long Island. Everyone, welcome Annie. We also have Molly, who will be moderating this conversation with her. Molly came to Oxbow in the summer of 2019 as a campus office assistant after completing her MFA at Illinois State University. She is a practicing artist and works between collage, photography, sculpture, and installation. In the fall of 2019, she relocated to Chicago to work in the Chicago office to provide administrative support to the Chicago team. Since then, she has transitioned into the role of executive assistant and oversees Oxbow's databases, archives, grant writing, research, management, and supports the development team in all aspects of fundraising. And Molly is also our membership coordinator, and this program is a part of our membership, the Samson Club. And we do monthly Toast Tuesday talks where members of our staff engage with Oxbow community members, whether they're artists, makers, or thinkers, and they have a conversation over lunch and talk about Toast as well and history and all of their connections to Oxbow. So if you want more information about our Samson Club, please do check out our website. There are really great perks. You get Oxbow merch, exclusive workshops, and more things that relate to Oxbow and experiences that we have as well. So I will put the link in the chat for that towards the end. But with that, I will give it over to Molly and Annie so that we can begin our talk today. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you, Sierra. Thanks for that lovely introduction. And thank you, Annie, for being here with me today. I apologize to everyone if I'm a little echoey. I'm in a gallery space on campus with good Wi-Fi, but I hope you all can hear me okay. So we just heard from you, Annie, about one of your favorite toast recipes. For those who maybe don't know, the Toast Bar is a quintessential part of Oxbow. It's currently on hold right now due to COVID precautions, but historically has been a place to get a late night snack after a dance party, experiment with different toast recipes. There is a plethora of toast recipes that folks have contributed over the years. And so do you have a favorite Toast Bar memory, Annie, before we get into talking about the archives?
Oh, so many. Like the late night Toast Bar is always, again, like I said earlier, just a very fun memory, especially just trying to figure out what you're doing next, where you're going. One of my most favorite memories, though, is I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2014. I had a staff show in the gallery in the Old Inn, and I decided to make a tower of peanut butter toast. At that point, I was doing a lot of like weird food art. And so I got, some very inexpensive and like on sale Wonder Bread from Demond's in town, the local grocery store, and started to assemble this tower of toast, so like log cabin style stacking. And I was using the toaster in the Old Inn, and I was there for maybe 4 or 5 hours over the night, just assembling these little pieces to put onto this larger armature structure. And it was just a really very like exemplary moment at Oxbow where you're like making work somewhere on campus and you have people coming up asking what you're doing, how's it going, this is like, tell me more. And you get into these really amazing conversations with people that you just, you know, you're not in class with maybe, or because you're on staff working, you know, really hard, you just don't have the time to like engage in the same way. So that ended up being a really special and memorable toast bar memory for me, just sort of like the waves of people coming through and the chats. Yeah.
That's such a good one. I'm envisioning this peanut butter toast tower in that Olden Gallery. That's really great. Yeah, I guess on that note, could you share with us a little bit about your time at Oxbow? You were here for many, many years, and I'm curious sort of how you first came to Oxbow, and then how you transitioned into a more full-time role here, and really what led you to being so interested and invested in the archives and the history at Oxbow, which is, I think, one of the things you're most known for now since you've left us.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun. I love the archives. They're such an important part of, I think, many institutions, but especially Oxbow being what it is and its age. So yeah, I started at Oxbow. I was a fellowship student in 2010. My really good friend, Kate Clark, she, you know, had just been a fellow the previous year. And, you know, by word of mouth, she was just like, you have to apply. Like, I had the most life-changing summer. And, you know, I took her word because she, you know, you take her word. And I applied and I got in and I was just over the moon. I was so excited. I came the day after graduation, undergrad from Parsons, and Carmen Price picked me up in his old red car from the airport, and we're winding up this old road with the trees everywhere. And I was like, where am I? Because, you know, it wasn't the same sort of like, I didn't see tons of photographs of Oxbow at that point. I don't think like social media was huge. You're not seeing people sharing these photos of the space as much. And I just remember feeling like immediately so grounded there and so excited just to start this new like residency experience, something that I had never experienced before. And especially being, you know, so young, like 20, 21, I guess, 22. And yeah, I spent the whole summer, I worked in the office as the office assistant or a office fellow, had a studio in the Bogart, met some like lifelong friends that I'm still in touch with today, and just had like such an incredible summer. And it's, I think no matter how long someone's at Oxbow for, whether it's like a weekend or maybe an open studio to someone who's been there for, I don't even know how many years it is now, John Rossi, but you know, as long as you have like, I think you get to know Oxbow in so many different ways over that period of time, whether it's small or long. But anyway, yeah, so I was there that summer, and then, you know, timing and good luck, I was invited back to be office assistant. And then I worked on campus in the summer for many years, and then started working full time in Chicago. And I started to get, you know, I think working in the office and sort of helping to process art on the Meadow registrations and doing a lot of sort of Excel work and processing of money, you know, money from the Ox shop and things like that. I started to really appreciate that kind of work and that kind of organization, which is like funny how counterintuitive it is, kind of thinking about my art practice, which was like pretty messy and all over the place and pulling materials from everywhere and not really having like an organizational way that I think of making my work necessarily, or that I thought at the time, which has since changed. But yeah, I started to get really interested in those kinds of more technical processes. And at the same time, just being in this space where you're hearing stories like every single day of what used to happen at Oxbow, like what it was like in the past, and wanting to sort of keep those stories somehow. So, you know, I would start to write out like these stories in a notebook, very, very, you know, briefly, just like noting like, oh, we need to make sure to save this. And over time, we, I think Rebecca and I and a number of other folks on staff, were kind of trying to figure out a way to do it more, something that would last more long term, because, and the stories, stories are created every day. Events are created every day. Like, there's so much programming happening on campus, both like formally, quote unquote, but also, a student that says, I want to do this one thing tomorrow, and then makes a poster. And like, that's like such an important event to capture, right? Anyway, so we decided to do, to sort of invest more in the archive and invest a little bit of time. And I remember really wanting just to learn more about archiving, because I didn't know any of the formalities behind it, and like what helps to make an archive that's, trustworthy and can last for a long time. So I was, did some professional development, which was amazing to have that support from an organization to do a short workshop at the Chicago Artists Coalition. And then, we got into doing some oral history recordings, which I can talk about later. But that was sort of, for my time there, the oral history recordings were definitely like peak. I felt like that was a really exciting contribution and something that was really important to me to like learn for my own future. I really appreciate that medium. I think it's important to get, recording voices from all different places and different types of people. And StoryCorps is just a really interesting organization that is really committed to getting stories from all different types of people, all different cultures. And so, yeah, that was just a really exciting kind of last archival push when I was there. But yeah, I think I've rambled on a bit, but that's sort of how I got into the archival realm. And I also, in my personal work, I would used to pull from family archives as well. So that was something like having letters between my parents and using some of that information for personal work. So yeah, that's kind of how I got interested in archiving.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so, like, what a special thing that coming to Oxbow and working with Oxbow's archive has led you down this really a sort of new path through grad school and where you're at now. And I think a lot of what you said resonates with me too. I started working at Oxbow in the office on campus and processing art in the meta registrations and working with lots of spreadsheets and trying to figure out the best communicate information between the Chicago office and the campus office. And that sort of data management has very much continued into my current role. And I think I'll sort of give everyone a little bit of background about where Oxbow's archives are now. Shannon, our director, and I have been working really closely together to both learn about and look through the archives, but also to really think about the longevity of the archives. And we've been working together to write a lot of grants to try to secure funding so that we can bring in a professional archivist to come in and assess Oxbow's archives and really help us formulate a plan for how we can protect them, maintain them, and also add to them. Because as you said, Annie, there's so much that happens in a day, in a week, in a summer on campus that is unplanned, and so much that is planned. But all of those events have ephemera and posters and photographs and student works that get left at Oxbow and artwork, and all of this amazing material record of what happens here. And we really want, one of the big goals is to come up with a set of processes and procedures, which I'm sure you're now very familiar with, having completed your master's program, as to how those things can be incorporated and added to the archive to make sure that, beyond my time here, beyond your time here, beyond any individual's tenure at Oxbow, that these archives can outlive any of us and continue to be added to and to be cared for. And so that's really what we're working on now. with the archives. It's been really special to dig through the kind of unwieldy state of the archives right now, though. I feel like every couple weeks I find something that I haven't seen before. You know, just yesterday when I was preparing the PowerPoint that we'll get into in a little bit, you told me about this old photo of the coho that you loved. And I was like, I don't know that I've seen that photo, but it has to be digitized somewhere. And I found it, you know, on one of the servers. And continue, you know, just continuing to discover things like that. And I guess to give everyone a bit of context, our archives are housed in a number of locations right now. We used to occupy an office at the Art Institute of Chicago, as well as our site on campus. We have since moved out of that office in Chicago. There were a number of archives housed in that office that are now in climate-controlled storage in Michigan. There's a number of archives that are on site, actually on campus. And then the Art Institute of Chicago also holds a number of our archives in their climate-controlled institutional storage. It's a service that they offer for various departments on campus. And so there's a number of our really historical photographs and documents that are held there as well. And so another goal of this grant writing process and securing funding is to come up with a more accessible way for staff to access the archives and to know what is kept where and for things to be cataloged. But as I'm sure you know, Annie, that is a huge project that takes a lot of time and expertise and funding. And so Shannon and I have really been trying to build a foundation to carry out some of this work. So with that, I'll ask you, Annie, what do you think the role is of archives at institutions like Oxbow, and why are they important both to care for the historic materials and also to continue to add to?
Yeah, it's so exciting to hear that that's like a priority, because it really, I mean, it takes a lot of time and focus and sort of keeping within that scope of doing the sort of archive care over time. So it's awesome. I mean, I think archives as a whole is, you know, it's sort of to document an activity of a group of people, right? So it's, whether it's a government body, whether it's a small arts organization like Oxbow, you are trying to document the processes and the activities and what is happening within that space. And I think, you know, you have your institutional records, you have the records that show very cut and dry, like this person came to Oxbow here, and can have their course registration as a document of that record. There's also, you know, personal collections that Oxbow has acquired from Betsy Ruprecht, from a number of different individuals that, you know, those collections tell a story not just of the organization, but of their lives as well. So, you know, having Oxbow be an organization that it has been put in the care of Oxbow, like that's another sort of important thing to keep in mind for any organization, is like when you're caring for others' materials, you want to be able to sort of to show that, you know, you have put the time and energy in and that they're being used. I mean, I think ultimately what an archive is helpful for is the use and the access by a number of different people, depending on, again, what organization it is. But for a sort of arts institution like Oxbow, you think, like you said, staff are going to want to take a look for inspiration, for maybe marketing purposes, for, you know, programmatic purposes, which I know, like when I was there, we used to use all the time, just to see what has happened in the past, what can we pull from, what would the future look like with like bringing all of this together. I think that then you can also think about the materials in the Oxbow collection in sort of an art historical sense. I think that, like we've talked about, Oxbow, you know, there hasn't been a ton of scholarly writing about Oxbow in the past, and it does fit itself into this art historical context that's so important in sort of the 20th century or the 19th century, especially in the Midwest. And so the archives can be used by scholars to mine and find that information that is so important to sort of situate Oxbow within that art historical space. And I think it's also a huge community builder. I mean, I think the way, because Oxbow is such an older organization and people have had so many experiences and we have so many people that have been there for so long, I'm very interested in the idea of community archiving, which is, technically, I guess, is bringing community in to sort of own their own materials and describe their own materials and things like that. And I mean, I always loved the idea of having the community participate in that, which, we did a little bit with the oral histories, but when you have these photos sort of going through and whoever has potential information about them, once you get a system set up to inventory, like writing a really good description of these materials. And that can just provide so much to future researchers, to future artists. I mean, that's the other big portion. I think art research is so different than scholarly research. It happens in so many different ways. People pull from so many different sources, and an archive is just like one of many places. And I think I love imagining like what the future of that looks like. And I know we've had a class with Gina Valentine who sort of brought in archiving a couple of years ago, and I know there's one this summer. The idea of building an artist's sort of citation list to pull from, and I love imagining Oxbow's archive being that in the future. And I think Oxbow is like that. The archive that you just described is such a common description of many archives all over the country, all over the world. Like, I think it is really hard because it takes a ton of money, it takes a ton of time, and it takes a lot of technical and sort of organizational, formal, like knowing what you want to get out of your archive and then putting that into like some sort of formalization. It's complicated, right? It's hard, and it takes a lot of conversation and a lot of like practice. So yeah, I mean, I think the archive is so valuable in so many ways, but I think it definitely involves a lot of time. And it's so awesome to hear that you're applying for grants. I know tons of projects get funded on granting timelines, and project archivists coming in. So it's like a great step.
Yeah, we're trying. I love so much of what you said. It's like you're a fly on the wall for Shannon and I's grant writing sessions related to the archive. I think you touched on so many crucial points related to why the archives are so essential for an institution like Oxbow that's been around for so long, especially what you spoke to related to the lack of scholarly research about Oxbow and the role of the archives to be used in the future for scholars to be able to position Oxbow in a larger context of Midwestern art history, of national art schools and artist-run institutions. I think there's so, and we know that it was very much a part of all of those conversations, but how do you illustrate that and show that to an external audience? And I think also the potential of the archives to be used for educational purposes, because we are a school, and education is at the core of everything we do. And so I thought that the Gina Valentine's class last summer that was here, I thought that the way that they utilized the archives was really great. They digitized several boxes of materials and digitized them at very, very high resolutions. And I believe they also made a Wikipedia page for Oxbow. And this class, the entire class was, it was called In Data, and it was about the role of data and how you define truth within data and what kind of stories data and archives can tell. We did Shannon did a conversation with Gina recently as part of our Oxtails and Cocktails virtual series. And so that is available on our YouTube channel as well, if anyone's curious about Gina and her work, which also deals with archives and data in some really compelling ways. So thank you, Annie, for sharing your perspective on the importance of archives at Oxbow and at small to mid-sized art institutions. So we're going to dive into some archival materials at Oxbow. Annie and I both picked out some of our faves that we've come across in our time working with them. It won't necessarily be a linear progression through the archives, and by no means is it comprehensive or all-encompassing. It was very hard to keep the presentation short. So we'll just run through some of that and show everyone a little bit of the kind of scope of materials that are in our archive. So I'm gonna share my screen, bear with me. All right, can you see my screen, Annie?
Yes.
Great, awesome. So our first slide is a lovely photo of Annie. This was from your first summer here as a fellow, right?
That was my studio in the Bogart on the porch, the right side of the porch. Yeah.
These are amazing.
Yeah, this was, I think I was whittling a stick. I think I got very into whittling that summer. I don't remember what I used them for, but you can see right in the middle is my pulled pork made out of probably really like sort of falling apart wood chunks from a stump in the woods that I think I made Polly, who was working on campus at the time. I didn't make him, but I asked him if he could like grab it with like the tractor pull or something, and he like generously did that for me. Yeah, that was a great studio. What a good summer.
Yeah, it looks like you have had a lot of exciting things happening. I love the sack of pulled pork in the background. So good. And so zooming out, as everyone knows, Oxbow is located in Saugatuck, along the Kalamazoo River, just over the dunes from Lake Michigan. And this on the left-hand side is the cover of a catalog. I believe this one is from 1941, I want to say, or close to it. It's one of the earliest actual physical catalogs that we have in our archive. I just really love this one. I love the illustration in the upper left of someone kneeling down with their easel behind them, and then with a very historic photo of the site that Oxbow is situated on in the background. And then before we get in deeper, so everyone here knows this is a screenshot of Oxbow's online interactive map, which we created last summer, in response to COVID and as a way to engage with folks in our membership program and folks at a distance. So one of our staff members, Doug Drury, drew all of the building illustrations that is on the map. We will drop the link to the map in the chat later on in the talk. But all of these buildings on the map are clickable. And when you click into them, there are stories about the buildings, history about the cabins, archival photos woven in throughout. There are also current playlists from current staff woven in throughout the studios and the dance floor. And so I think that the interactive map, as Annie and I were talking about earlier, about historic archives and also current living archives and how you add to them. This is one small way we're sort of illustrating that and really trying to kind of synthesize a lot of materials and also make them accessible for people in our community. Again, it's by no means comprehensive, and we're always adding to it. There are periodic map updates throughout the year where we add more archival information and also more contemporary and current information. So if you're curious or if you haven't accessed the map yet, we'll definitely share that information with you. And then for those who might be a little more unfamiliar, I'm just going to go through a very brief overview of Oxbow's early history, because we are a very old institution that is still standing. We were founded by Frederick Versman and Walter Marshall Clute, who were artists from the Art Institute of Chicago, and they began the tradition of taking classes and teaching classes at Oxbow after visiting the Saugatuck area one summer. They were really enamored with the light and the beauty of the area and the natural access to nature coming from Chicago. And so they began teaching painting classes at the Bandel Farm, which was on the east bank of the Kalamazoo River, which is approximately a mile or so upstream from Oxbow's current location. And then in 1914, the school moved its entire operation to the Riverside Hotel, which is now known as the Old Inn. The Old Inn is the original building of the Riverside Hotel, and it's remarkable looking at archival photos of many of the buildings on campus, but especially of the Riverside Hotel, and how similar they still look. Through the years, we've been able to maintain a lot of the original architecture and character of many of these historic buildings. And then in 1915, after the death of Walter Marshall Clute, with the shareholders, including Isabel and Edgar Ruprecht, Versman took over as director for the next 30 years. And Thomas Eddie Talmadge was a renowned architect and architectural historian, came to Oxbow, built his own personal cabin, as well as the cabin of a good friend, known as the Talmadge and the Norton cabins, and quickly became a very, very strong supporter of Oxbow, and purchased much of the land surrounding Oxbow, and then donated it to the school upon his death. And so that is how and why the woods surrounding Oxbow are now referred to as the Talmadge Woods. So that is a very, very brief overview of our earliest history to give you a bit of context as to how far back our archives date and how this magical, beautiful place initially came to be. So first slide, we have a collection of photos from a Life magazine shoot that were taken at Oxbow in 1941. And there are many more photos part of this collection, and I think they're all incredibly compelling and really illustrate the activity of artists making work in the woods at Oxbow. Yeah.
I love I think the outdoor studio shots are some of my favorite, and just to see over the years how people have employed the space around them and what nooks and crannies people decide to make work in, whether making work in that space, whether installing in that space. And I also really just love the shots of like portraiture being painted, and I love the shot at the bottom right of the woman holding, I'm presuming, that man's portrait. And I used to paint a ton of portraits, and I just really appreciate that moment of like presenting something you've done of somebody and being like, what do you think? Yeah, these are so great. And I was telling Molly earlier, the New York Public Library has digitized all of the Life magazine issues, I think from the mid 30s up until, I don't know exactly when, but I think you can go into those archives and find a good majority of this photo shoot, and potentially a second one that I know Wallace Kirkland took a number of photos, but I believe there's a second photographer that was on campus. I could be wrong, but after doing some research earlier, I'm almost positive these photos were taken at 2 different time periods. Not these ones, but there's another set of them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the set that I'm most familiar with is the one by Wallace Kirkland, but yeah, I'll definitely have to do some digging about that second set.
Yeah, and that's just like a note that I sort of was thinking about, like the the way that the internet has, I think, complicated digital archives at this point, because these photos are all over the place. They're on Pinterest, they're on someone's blog, like they're on personal blogs of people who've been to Oxbow, and there's all different dates on them, which is just like a really interesting way to think about how data is switched over time, and how you don't necessarily have control over the information that you're sort of that's out in the world about like your organization necessarily, which is just like a whole other conversation, but something to note, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
And also how complicated it can become to find, you know, if you don't necessarily have the source materials in your possession, how complicated it can be to piece through all of that data and find what is true and accurate. Yeah. These are a few photos of folks painting on Oxbow's Meadow throughout the years. I was talking to Annie earlier about how interesting it has been to categorize the photos at Oxbow in different ways, which I think the map, making that the interactive map definitely lended itself to. But sort of looking at, you know, okay, what story do all of the photos of people painting on the Meadow tell when you look at them as a group? And also compare them with, you know, art on the Meadow classes that continue to happen of folks painting on the Meadow. And so these three photos are just a very small portion of the number of archival photos we have of plein air painting, because Oxbow, you know, we offer classes in a range of mediums now, but our earliest roots really come back to plein air painting.
Yeah, definitely.
This is one of my most favorite photos in the archive. Annie actually hadn't seen this photo before until we talked earlier. And I think it's just so quintessentially Oxbow, bathing in the lagoon, laughing with friends. And Annie had a funny story about her fellowship summer related to this photo as well.
Yeah, I think it was either one of the fellows, I think it was one of the fellows who just decided to bathe in the lagoon for like a set amount of time. Maybe it was all summer, maybe it was a week. But I just remember like having like discussions at length about biodegradable soap and using that space as like a cleansing body of water, which I think is cleansing in many ways. But I just thought that was probably not the first time that that's happened. So
yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. And you'll see in the captions that where it is available, I have included information about the materials that we're sharing with you today. Some materials we have full dates and captions and information on, and others we just don't have that immediately available. But this photo particularly was from the Ruprecht collection, Betsy Ruprecht collection that has since been donated to Oxbow and is under our care now. And so that's a little bit of information about why some of the captions include different information. These are some photos. The one on the left is a photo of the old Oxbow studios when they were right on the water. And then the photo on the right is of the red cabin. It's the building on the left, which looks remarkably similar today. It looks, in my opinion, almost exactly the same in terms of its architecture, the color it's painted. It's very, very surprising. I think for me, it's very surprisingly easy to identify buildings on campus in the archival photos. And this one on the right was taken in the 1950s.
Yeah. I agree, Molly. I mean, I think so much of the architecture has stayed very similar, which is like such a testament just to, you know, wanting to preserve a space and not change it too much. And I think something that I've been thinking about recently in my new work at Planting Fields, which they're doing a lot of in like house restoration and landscape architecture restoration. The archival photos play a huge role in those types of projects. and they are just so important to that, that kind of use as well. So yeah, no, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that too is, as you said, a testament to the care that participants and staff and people associated with Oxbow have shown for the space, for the buildings, for the environment, for the landscape over the years. And I think that's still something that strikes me so much about Oxbow as a place, is that there's so much care in everything that everyone at Oxbow does, from the meals that are prepared to the programming to the housekeeping. I mean, from every level of staff at the organization and people who come through, I think the care that is shown and has been shown throughout our history is really remarkable.
Definitely, yeah.
This is an image of the old lighthouse. Annie, I think you mentioned that you had a story related to the lighthouse.
Yeah, I mean, this photo, and there's another one actually that really illustrates coming up. When we did the StoryCorps recordings, I went out to the lighthouse and interviewed Norm Deem and his son, and who their family has owned that lighthouse out on the lagoon for years, forever. And that was a really special interview. Just Norm was telling tons of stories about his and his family's interactions with those at Oxbow on campus, from the volleyball games that they would play, like the Lighthouse versus Oxbow, and sort of, I think if I remember correctly, to sort of, challenge a volleyball game, you would leave a dead fish on somebody's stoop. Like that was the challenge. And some of these stories, I should preface too with, there are so many people that know these stories, so I'm probably, shortening them very, very intensely. But this is just like a taste. And then my favorite one was Norm Dean was telling us about Mary Kay, who used to be the caretaker at Oxbow, and how he would go out and get Mary Kay and Jean and bring them over, and they would have a cocktail hour, and they would, have a nice little cocktail hour. Mary Kay would say, "Okay, we're gonna go home," and Norm would give her, I think it was a Dixie cup of gin for the ride back, which I just really appreciated. And yeah, that's the photo that made me sort of, yeah, I'm so glad you could find this one. It's such a special photo. And again, you could say so much about these photos and these people, and I'm really just touching the surface. And there's so many people in the community that know these stories 10 times better than I ever will, or, so that's just like another great example of why, recording oral history, especially in these kinds of cases, is so awesome and so exciting to have for the future. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love this photo. I think it's a Jean in the middle on her chair throne. Reads as a throne to me, and then Mary Kay on the right-hand side with her dog behind her. I think is a really brilliant photo. And those more familiar with Oxbow will come to hear stories about how the Mary Kay is haunted. The Mary Kay cabin is haunted by Mary Kay, who has since passed. And there are anecdotes floating around this summer that because there are so many dogs on campus this summer, that Mary Kay is very pleased because she was so close with her dog. I think her dog's name was Rex. He was a big German Shepherd. So yeah, so many stories about this place and the people who have come through it.
Definitely. And one of my favorite parts about that is I think stories change over time. And I think I love the idea of capturing the evolution of an Oxbow story, or an Oxbow ghost story, or whichever story you choose.
Absolutely. I'm moving through some of these last ones a little bit quickly because we're running out of time. We might go a little bit over, so if some folks have to leave, that's okay. But for recording purposes, we're going to keep going. This is one of my favorite moments that I've come across in the last year of the archive. When I first started at Oxbow, something that became immediately apparent was the importance and the role of astrology. Staff at Oxbow love astrology. I love astrology, so it's like I'm gonna fit in here just fine. These are my people. But this is the inside of a guest register book. I think it's from sometime in the 90s. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but on the inside front cover of this guest book is this astrological chart drawn on the left side, and then someone wrote in, "This is why," with an arrow pointing towards it. And then there's the breakdown of the earth, air, water, and fire signs, with a little planetary doodle. And then on the right-hand side, everyone who filled in the guest book, it looks like something is crossed out and horoscope is written in, and most people would share what their horoscope was when they signed the guest book. And I think that when I found that, it was such a moment of that I already knew, but it was a clarifying moment of how many things at Oxbow that are traditions that feel like part of Oxbow's character, or that make Oxbow such a special, weird, wonderful place, have been happening for such a long time, and longer, maybe than a lot of us realize or know. And I think that that's really special too. And so that was like a personal moment for me of sort of realizing just how large this web is of tradition and ritual and things that I've never experienced anywhere else, that are very sort of embedded in Oxbow and in the Oxbow experience.
Yeah, I love this too, because I think, we would always joke like nothing ever is new at Oxbow. Like things have happened, like you're saying, things have happened over and over and over. And it's like, I think that's such a good thing. Like, I feel like that's such a comfort to know that, trends happen, like things continue, things every 20 years, they like repeat in this way, which is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking with Rebecca actually about that earlier this summer. As a result of COVID, she's worked so hard with Maddie to kind of rethink programming for this summer. And they have been running a new 3-week model. That's a very interdisciplinary, intensive experience where students can come and they take several different classes during their 3-week time at Oxbow, but they're sort of working between mediums and classes to build a body of work. And when we initially released the schedule, or this new format, of course we had people reaching out to us saying, I want the old way, like this is new, I don't understand, why are you changing things? And I think change is hard in a lot of ways. It's very hard for me. And there's actually, in 1977, there was a program at Oxbow called Oxbow Extended, and you can see it in the 1977 catalog. And it was a 3 or 4 week, very interdisciplinary model of programming. And that was a moment that, again, another moment that illustrated that, well, actually, this isn't brand new. We've done this at Oxbow before, just not in recent memory.
Definitely.
And then I just have some photos I dropped, or some scans I've dropped in of some various ephemera, because that's such a big part of Oxbow's archives, in addition to photos and letters, and is posters for events and happenings. It looks like the one on the left was from a kite building competition, which is amazing. I have no idea when that happened, but I would have loved to be there. It sounds like so much fun. And then the right is from, I believe it's something development related, fundraising related, and you have these ribbons coming out of the bottom with plumbing, screens, everything, electricity, carpentry, which I thought was really, I just love this whole illustration.
I love that it pulls from the furniture on campus because I know exactly, and I'm sure there's many types of this particular dresser, but the one in my mind is in the far right hand corner of the Olden in that one single room, and it's blue. And I feel like, unless it's moved, which it may have, but that just for me pulls back such intense like memories of that space too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when I was digging through the archives yesterday, I found this amazing exhibition in the Olden Gallery that Annie, Ryan Trum, Mac, and Elizabeth Chodos collaboratively did together. And so I wanted to share that for memory's sake, and also because I think like right before I started at Oxbow, I was, stalking and researching people who worked at Oxbow, and somehow I came across a photo of this exhibition, maybe on social media, and I was like, wow, like I want to be there. It's like so playful, and so I was really compelled by these photos of this exhibition that, come to find out, Annie was a part of when I learned about Oxbow.
That's so nice to hear. This was such a fun show. That just, was born on Brian Trum's porch one night, and we just put it all together, just like accumulated all of our different ways of making. And I did the Morse code spray paint on the wall, and Mac's drawings, and Ryan's beanbag chunks. Yeah,
I love it. And it all works so well together too. It's a really, really great one. I was really excited to come across these photos yesterday when I was digging in the server. And of course, I had to find a photo of Annie in costume because I was somewhere at Oxbow without dressing up. Do you remember what this costume was?
Yeah, I remember this was a collection of costumes from, I think, a local school. It might have been like Saugatuck Douglas High School, or maybe a local church. Maybe I'm getting that part wrong, but someone dropped off boxes of these things, and this was their first iteration. We all tried, there were like 8 people, and they're trying costumes on in the office. And I think maybe 5 years later, there were like just sections of pieces of those costumes people had repurposed into other get-ups, which is like the beauty of the Kim, the Oxbow costume closet, right? The ability to find something and change it to your needs or liking. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what this costume was of?
I think it was a bear.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Ears. Yeah, it had ears on the top. Mm-hmm. Okay. It was all like woodland creatures, which is appropriate for Oxbow.
Very fitting.
Yeah.
A few more of Annie. There's one that I skipped over that I just want to touch on because it was one of my favorite discoveries. When I started working with the archives, there was a piece geodesic dome on the Oxbow Meadow in the 1960s. And I love these photos of the dome installed on the meadow and people painting under it. And I very recently found a photo of Leaf Brush, who recently passed away, who was an Oxbow artist in residence, installing a sound sculpture underneath the dome. Yeah, I don't have much more to say about the geodesic dome because there's not a whole lot of information about it. But I was so intrigued when I found this pamphlet on the left. And then I think next I found a letter about someone writing to the city of Saugatuck about repairing the dome. And then I finally came across photos of the dome actually installed on the Oxbow Meadow.
This is just such a good example of, we talked about earlier, like the idea that Oxbow was like the 60s when Buckminster Fuller like brought the idea of the geodesic dome to like fame and sort of use all around as this like super structural, like important structure, strong structure, right? So like Oxbow was right there with it, with their own geodesic dome on the
Meadow. Yeah, totally. I'm gonna stop my share. That was just a very, very brief taste and look into Oxbow's massive and sometimes unwieldy archive. But that's also what makes it so compelling and special. So with all of that, tell us about where you're at now, Annie. And you just completed a master's program and you just started a new job yesterday, right?
Yeah, so I graduated from UNC. I had such a good experience there. I learned a lot about physical archives, but the focus that I sort of ended up going into was digital archiving and digital preservation. My master's paper was on how small arts organizations and museums and institutions are looking to preserve their born digital collections. So material that doesn't have any physical surrogate, right? So that's like, I think in the long term, that realm is something that I'm really interested in pursuing. I still think, given COVID and the fact that I wasn't able to, spend a lot of time in physical archives, like getting that physical experience, that's sort of what I'm doing this summer, is working at this foundation, helping to gain intellectual control over one of their new collections. So we're doing a big inventorying project of a local architecture firm. So Planting Fields in Long Island is, that space was designed by the Olmsted brothers, Frederick Law Olmsted of Central Park and the 1893 exhibition in Chicago fame. They're his sons. They did the architectural design, landscape design at this organization. So they're basically doing a similar thing, thinking into the future. There's not a ton of scholarly information about landscape architecture. And they're trying to become that space where those primary materials can be sourced for scholars to use in their writing. So it feels really, it's like a different area that I'm used to. It's not necessarily focused on fine art, but it's a really fascinating and exciting summer job. So
yeah, that's so exciting, and what a great experience to be a part of. Well, great, and maybe also daunting to be a part of those very initial steps of an organization trying to gain control and some understanding of their archives.
Definitely. It's huge. I mean, I think that is the important thing to like remember in these projects, to like give yourself time and space, and it takes time to go through and sort of gain an insight into what this collection has and what it can do for the organization and for researchers, artists, whoever ends up using it, whatever the organization deems as like the user of this information. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing so much with us today about your time at Oxbow and also where you're at now. I think we can offer just a little bit of time if anyone has any questions for Annie. And then if not, we will go ahead and wrap up. Well, thank you so much, Annie. It was such a treat to talk to you and to hear your perspective on so much of this, especially after completing your recent grad program. It's always a joy to talk to you about all things Oxbow, because your knowledge is, it runs deep. You know so much about Oxbow's archives and did so much with them while you were here. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. It was so nice to see all of you too. So many people here that hi, it's so nice to see you all.
Thanks, Annie. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
And thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.